We begin this story with Matthew, who has had to face one of the most uncomfortable situations for a young man. Being the new kid at a new school where he knows no one, he is certain he will be the target of abuse because of his appearance. He also won't stop arguing with his mother, blaming her for everything. If she hadn't remarried, he wouldn't have had to move, losing all his friends just so she could have more time with her new husband. On his first day at school, he immediately stood out by wearing a formal suit when everyone else wore casual clothes. The first to make fun of him was Nick, who actually wasn't so bad and later offered to show him around the school. Nick also introduced him to his friend Ruby, who was kind to him too. Soon, Matthew had already made 2 friends. But during lunchtime, he couldn't take his eyes off Teresa, the most popular and beautiful girl in school. The moment Matthew got the chance, he approached her to ask her out. It is at this point that we meet the villain of the story, Hector, Teresa's boyfriend, who quickly marks his territory and knocks Matthew to the ground, then mocks him. Just as expected, when the school day ends, Matthew returns home, trying to deal with the frustration of being a weakling everyone picks on. At that moment, his stepfather, Ray, approaches to ask him how his day had gone. As you might expect, Matthew only responds with fine just to be left alone. However, Ray notices that his stepson has posters of boxers on his wall. Wanting to create a bond, Ray decides to give him a book about Ali, the greatest boxer of all time. At that moment, Matthew pretends not to care about the gift. He doesn't want to have a relationship with his stepfather, but shortly afterward, he begins to carry the book everywhere. One morning at school, Hector, knowing that Matthew is too cowardly to defend himself, decides to bother him some more. He throws juice on his book and his shirt. While they are mocking the poor kid, they catch the attention of Dan, the school janitor, who looks anything but a janitor. Dan pulls Hector and his friends away so that Matthew can continue his day in peace. But this doesn't last long. As soon as lunchtime begins, Hector catches Matthew watching the trials for the school's boxing team and starts mocking him once more. Nick shows up to defend his friend, which sparks a fight. Only Nick and Matthew end up facing consequences. At home, Matthew finally confesses to his parents what is going on and asks his mother for permission to join a gym where he can learn to fight. At first, his mother doesn't want her son to become someone violent, but Ray, who knows what it feels like, convinces her to at least let him try out. Matthew enters the gym and sees the young people boxing. His heart races just thinking about being able to do that, and his eyes fill with excitement. Coach Howard tells them that they will soon hold qualifying trials to decide who will be part of the official team. At that moment, Matthew sees Hector and his friend Joy enter the gym. It turns out they are the only ones already approved for the team. The rest will have to fight against them to prove their worth. Seeing this, Matthew takes his things and heads for the door. There, he encounters Dan, who tells him that he will never conquer his fears if he always runs away. The blows only hurt for a while, but fear lasts forever unless you face it. With these words, Matthew returns to the line and faces Hector, who, as expected, gives him a tremendous beating in front of everyone. Matthew is unable to land even a single blow, just letting himself be pounded until Howard stops the fight. When everyone leaves, Matthew is the only one remaining in the gym, and Dan comes back to ask him what he thinks he did wrong. Then, Dan tells him his story. It turns out Dan was a former boxing champion who had made poor decisions at the top of his game and now has to settle for being a janitor. There, he commits to showing Matthew what he knows and training him after school so he can become someone strong, capable of defending himself. During the first days, Dan notices that Matthew gets tired too quickly. He isn't fat. It turns out that the young man is a leukemia survivor, and his stamina is in the gutter. For a long time, Matthew had wanted to be a boxer, but his overprotective mother never let him near a gym, much less use gloves. She wanted him to be an accountant or maybe a doctor, some safe profession that didn't involve getting pummeled by other boys. Over time, the fruits of his training begin to show. His endurance and lung capacity improve, allowing Matthew to go a full practice round without tiring. His speed and ability to throw accurate punches also improve a great deal, and soon he could be the rival Hector is looking for. One afternoon, Hector and his friends start bothering Matthew again, but this time he doesn't plan to allow it. He accepts the challenge, and they go to the gym. However, during their fight, Hector fights dirty, and his friends help him when Matthew is on the floor. Dan appears and stops them, threatening to report the incident to the administration so Hector and Joy would be expelled for assault. Howard appears and defends his boys, threatening Dan with getting him fired if he tries to deprive the team of their 2 best fighters. He argues that Dan is just a janitor, easy to replace, and that he has known the principal for years, so she wouldn't believe anything Dan says. To solve the matter, Dan speaks with Howard in private and demands a spot for Matthew in the upcoming fight event so the kid can prove his abilities fairly. Confident that Hector couldn't be expelled, Howard agrees to give the boy a spot, but only if he brings a letter from his parents approving his participation, something very hard to obtain now that Matthew has returned home with a black eye. His mother couldn't be angrier or more worried about what he is doing after school. The next day, Dan gives Matthew the news. He gets excited about the opportunity but explains the problem with his mother. She would never agree to let him participate in the event, especially now that she knows how dangerous it is. At this point, Dan tells him that he can't hide behind his mother all the time. Over the years, he would regret not fighting for the respect he deserves. With just a few weeks until the event, Dan promises to teach Matthew everything he knows. They would do it behind his mother's back, and when the time came, he would know exactly what to say to convince her. But as the date approaches, his mother hasn't changed her mind, so he decides to forge the signatures and submit the document. Then, he goes to Dan's workshop to train as always. But Dan isn't there. Forced to train alone, the boy completes his daily assignment and returns home, where the principal is waiting with his parents. She had called his mother to confirm the permission, and all the truth about his fraud has been revealed. Caught between a rock and a hard place, Matthew confesses to his parents and the principal that he has been a victim of bullying from day one. Hector and his friends have turned his life into hell. He just wants the chance to face them and earn the respect he deserves, and they are denying him that opportunity over a silly signature. Then, he asks the principal about Dan, and she reveals that he has been fired for inciting violence at the school. Hearing this, Matthew leaves, leaving his mother furious at his attitude. But as far as he is concerned, this is his life, and he doesn't want to live it in fear. Later, Matthew visits Dan, who lives on a boat. There, he apologizes for causing him problems and asks him to continue training him for the event. Dan says he has nothing more to teach him, he has mastered all the techniques, and now it is time for him to go back home, make things right with his parents, and face Hector. The young man listens and returns home with a clear head. His mother, who has also been thinking things over, decides to let him participate in the event, and not only that, she will be supporting him from the stands. On the big day, Matthew gets into the ring with the support of his family and friends. Even his father has traveled from afar to watch him fight. Howard gets into the ring and explains the rules, 3 rounds of 1 minute each. The winner will be decided by the judges, and the boys will have 45 seconds of rest in each round. Once the fight begins, Hector dominates the ring, landing blow after blow to Matthew's head, who keeps his guard up. During the second round, Hector lands a punch to the liver, making Matthew coil in pain. Luckily, it is the last few seconds of the round, and Dan and his father rush to his corner to give him support. Dan tells him that this is the kind of passing pain he had talked about. From now on, no one can take away his courage. He just needs to go out there and do what they have practiced because, in everyone's eyes, he is already a winner. During the last round, images of Hector mocking him pass through Matthew's mind, as if each one gives more strength to his punches. He finally manages to land a direct punch to Hector's face, knocking down the villain. But Hector gets up before the final count. Because of this, Hector ends up winning the match by decision. However, in front of everyone, he offers his hand to Matthew as a sign of peace and recognition. Howard announces Hector as the winner but asks for applause for Matthew, who will now be the school team's main boxer since Hector will be graduating that year. The movie ends with Matthew as the star of the school, now that he has refused to bow his head and has fought for his convictions. And that's how this great movie ends. If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.